It is the 14th of October, and this day in Baptist history, our reading is A Servant in the Right Place at the Right Time. Our verse comes from Genesis chapter 24 and verse 27. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. With almost tedious repetition, we have reiterated the fact that persecution was continually experienced by our Baptist forebears in 9 of the 13 original American colonies that were established with state churches. This is easily understood when one considers the Puritan theology of the Reformation and the fact that these well-meaning pioneers were seeking to establish a theocracy. Pennsylvania was one of the colonies in which sole liberty was allowed. William Penn, son of Admiral William Penn of England, had been born on October 14, 1644. In early life, young William Penn embraced the tenets of the Quakers, and while serving his father's interests in Cork, Ireland, in 1666, he was imprisoned because of his convictions. In 1668, he was thrown into the Tower prison in London for practicing his faith. Again, in 1671, William Penn was incarcerated in the Newgate prison for 6 months because of his outspoken Quaker faith. In the following days, William Penn accepted as payment for all obligations of the British Crown a great territory in North America called Pennsylvania. On March 4, 1861, Charles II granted Penn the charter, and William Penn envisioned the establishment of a free colony for his co-religionists. In 1682, Penn, along with many immigrants, sailed for America, and in November of 1682, he met with the Indians on the site of what is today Philadelphia. It was he who laid out the city of Philadelphia, and for 2 years before returning to Great Britain, he governed the colony wisely, with full religious freedom granted to all inhabitants of the colony. Several Baptists from England, Wales, and Ireland were among the first settlers in Pennsylvania. Thomas Duncan, who had fled Ireland because of severe persecution, had sailed to Newport, Rhode Island to enjoy the sole liberty provided in that colony that had been established by the Baptists Roger Williams and Dr. John Clark. He apparently had worshipped there for several years, but with the opening of the colony of Pennsylvania, he, along with a few others, migrated in 1684 to Cold Spring in Bucks County, not far from Philadelphia. Immediately, he began his ministry and formed a Baptist church, which he served until his death in 1688. A meeting house had been constructed and sufficient ground and had been obtained to provide for a cemetery. Reverend Duncan was doubtless well advanced in years at the time, for Elias Keach referred to him as, and I quote, an ancient disciple and teacher among the Baptists, end of quote. Following Reverend Duncan's death, there was no pastor to replace him, and by 1702 the church was out of existence. In 1770, nothing remained of the Cold Spring Church with the exception of the graveyard and some foundation stones of the old building. If the story of Reverend Duncan were to end at this point, one might feel that his life had been a failure as far as the work of Christ is concerned. The first Baptist effort in Pennsylvania seemed short-lived without abiding fruit. But truth never dies. It was Pastor Duncan who counseled Elias Keach at a most strategic time in his life. The young man, son of Reverend Benjamin Keach of English fame, was an impostor who had presented himself as a Baptist preacher. As he stood in the pulpit preaching, he was overcome with conviction. Thinking him to be sick, one of the men sought to help him, and young Mr. Keach admitted that he was an impostor. He was taken to the elderly Pastor Thomas Duncan, who led young Mr. Keach to Christ and baptized him. He furthermore trained the young man and then ordained him as a Baptist preacher. In 1668, 20 years before the death of Thomas Duncan, Reverend Elias Keach led in the founding of the Lower Dublin or Penpeck Church, which for all intents and purposes became the foundation for all the subsequent Baptist work throughout the colony. Reverend Duncan's ministry in the life of Elias Keach made his persecution in Ireland, his ministering in obscurity in the colonies, and all the privations of life worthwhile. It has well been said that the greatest ability to dependability. May the Lord find us faithful today to his calling for our lives. To God be the glory.